Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is Dev Dive, where I get a chance to talk to interesting developers about their games. And today, we're joined by someone who's particularly interesting. This is Mr. Dan Paladin, one of the minds behind Alien Hominid, and Castle Crashers, and Pit People, and Battle Block Theater, all these games that you've probably heard of or played at some point in your life. But the team at his studio, the Behemoth, just put out a new game, aptly titled Behemoth. And it's a game I haven't heard too many people talking about, so I'm very excited to dive into why this game is so interesting and different from the rest of your catalog. But Dan, thank you very much for joining me. And my first question, just to get us out of the gate, why this game and why now? It's very different from the rest of your catalog, and why'd you choose this project at this time?
Wow, there's so many reasons at once. We're creators first, right? We make things when we want to make things, and we've made some smaller stuff like Super Soviet, Missile Master, and mini games and other things like PDA games became Battle Block Theater later. So we go to trade shows a lot, and we have arcade machines because we always like to hail back to those days.
Yeah, I've seen your booth at PAX West a couple times.
Yeah, so you've seen it. And so John Baez, he's really the big pusher of arcade machines. He wants more. He wants things that are for the show. And he wanted a game with the chicken. So I said, yeah, I can do that. It's primarily made for the arcade machines, but there was interest in achievements. So we just added achievements today. They went live. And we're updating the game some more. But it really was, let's just make a fun little game with the chicken. No enormous overhead alongside everything else. We've been making so many projects at once now. We're updating every game we've ever released before and making a new game. So, there it is. And then we have another one on the way while this is all happening. So we probably have more projects than people at this point.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to see this game, Behemoth, come out on Steam for the world to try. And you mentioned these other smaller projects that you've worked on, but them being mostly for actual arcade machines or included as smaller things within other games. This one, I think, does kind of stand out as just like a straight-up arcadey game. And it is smaller in scope, and I think it feels kind of unique because of that. But I'm curious what the development timeline of this game was like. How long ago did someone have the idea for this, and then when did it go into active production?
I think we spoke about its potential existence a little bit earlier this year, but in terms of actual footwork, 2.5, 3 months from my side.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we put it together really fast. One reason was we wanted to stress test our new tools and see how quickly we can put something bare bones together and then build off it. It was an experiment while also trying to get something ready for PAX East and, just kind of have like a little palate cleanser, have some fun. And the team really responded positively. Like whenever we make something and then move on to another thing and bounce between things, it's always fun. Like it's just exciting. You don't get burnt out, and making something with the chicken was interesting. Does it run into other enemies? Anytime I put a character in there, it felt wrong because it was like, this is the chicken's thing, not anything else. So I ended up just putting fruit and, got people to hate cantaloupe.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got touched on a lot of things that I want to dive more deeply into, but I think that the idea of this being an arcadey game is what really just closed my mind to this being something different for your team. I'm curious, for the team that made it, you and your team, actually, I'm not quite sure what your role was for this game. You want to elucidate that real quick? Because in the credits, it just says Behemoth, and it lists all your names, so I'm like, I don't know what you did.
Right. Well, game design and the artwork, it was a little bit of a smaller part of the team this time around. We're all sort of split, I guess, like all the time, because I'm bouncing between multiple projects as well while I was working on Behemoth. So that's one thing I do want anybody listening to know is, no, we didn't slow down Castle Crashers, Painter Boss Paradise. No, we didn't slow down Battle Blocks Update. All those things were moving at the exact same pace. It was just while that was happening, we managed this crazy thing in the middle. So a lot of the time I was doing it on the weekends or the nights or something like that. So it didn't impact any of the other projects, thankfully.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think people lose sight of that and think we go all hands on something. But we've been together for 21 years now, and we all know each other's strengths, weaknesses, things that we can do. And this is kind of like just sort of the byproduct of being able to get a game out randomly while working on a bunch of other projects.
Yeah. I mean, you've been pretty consistent over the course of your 21-year history with your major projects hitting on like a 4 to 5 year cycle. And this obviously is not a massive behemoth game, but pun, I guess, intended, but it is something that feels kind of like I like to we said like a palate cleanser. And I'm curious for this kind of smaller, arcadey, high score based game. Is this something that you and the team had been wanting to sort of put some effort into for a while, or did it just sort of come up in the process?
This game in particular, no, but I think, I think of the Behemoth as a company where we follow our gut because we've always done that. We've never had like a business plan since the day we were born. I mean, maybe John did, but I didn't. And it's just kind of feeling things out. We have so many ideas that we want to explore that there's ideas that we have, but they're usually not solidified. Like, for instance, I want to one day make a game that has resource collection, but will that be the next one? Will that be the one after? I don't know until it's time to sit down and see if it fits in there. But anytime we make something, it has to feel a little different. And so we were ready to axe the game the second that we were unable to get it to feel like it had something to offer. Anytime we make a game, whether it's big, small, whatever, it has to have the answer, why would I play this? And I like to think about who the games are for. So we had a bunch of games that were reflex based up until Pit People, where I realized anybody who's bad with reflex games are bad at all of our games. We should have something that they can excel at. And Pit People was kind of an answer to that. Watching everyone die in Alien Hominid HD relentlessly and never get to see the story. Invasion was a little nicer to people, but mean in other ways and allowed you to sort of get through things that looked impossible. And then Behemoth is kind of a game where anybody can sit down and play and understand what they're doing within a couple runs. And then someone says, oh, let me try. And it's sort of a bite-sized thing because I've seen how a lot of people play games, and a lot of people play games where they play it for like 10, 15 minutes and then they're done and they're happy, right? Whereas there's other people like me who want to just totally scour the crap out of games and, playing Dark Souls 3 for 400 hours and stuff like that. And there's different people, and the Behemoth as a company is always trying to find a way to give everybody something to try. It's like Super Soviet's cousin, but not really. It's its own thing still. And I think that the arcade machine is going to be really cool. We have this idea of like a giant chicken leg that you're moving back and forth and something to flap with. And I think it'll be really fun. The cabinet's still not figured out 100%, but we're trying to have a prototype of the arcade cabinet by the time we have a holiday party at work. Yeah, so we'll be prototyping our arcade cabinet as well. And then whatever that ends up being and being changed to is what you'll see at PAX East.
Sure, yeah. And I realized up to this point that, people have been looking at some footage that I've been including, but I haven't exactly described the game. But since you worked on it, I want you to how do you describe this game to someone who hasn't played it before?
Do I even? I usually just say give it a shot because it's a casual arcade extravaganza where you collect chickens and go through checkpoints. Yeah, so it's really just something you sit down and have fun with, and it's not anything to get really serious about. Unless you want to chase after high scores, then all of a sudden you can be brutal and try to get the number one, right? And there's two different high scores to get. You can either try to get as many baby chickens saved as possible, or you can get through all the checkpoints. And if you get more checkpoints than somebody else, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a higher score than them because you might just barely be making it through each one. And so there's two different types of things to get. It's interesting to see how far people can get. As a developer, I know by now that as soon as we hand something to someone, they're going to do something we didn't even expect after you reach X amount of players.
Well, for Behemoth, as a game as straightforward as it is, what kind of surprising things have you seen players do, even within the limited scope of the game?
I think the height of checkpoints that people are reaching were farther than I thought.
Do you have your high score memorized?
Yeah, I don't actually know my high score offhand because I've tried different builds.
Oh.
So with the latest change, we used to speed it up every time you went through a checkpoint, but with the change that went live today, that's no longer the case. There is no speeding up. Now, you'd think that speeding up would make the game harder, and that was the intention. And in some ways, that's true. In other ways, it actually gets easier once you get past a certain point because now that cantaloupe can't keep up with you because you're going too fast, so you don't even see it in the first place. Or things can't cluster because you're moving through so fast, right? So I actually removed the speed up per checkpoint because it got kind of ridiculous and then it almost became too easy. So if you were good enough to get to that high point, I was like, how are people getting this far? And then we did a stream and I ended up getting to the 55th checkpoint and I could have gone farther, but I purposely just jumped into a blade because I was like, oh my gosh. And I even called it out on the stream. I'm like, I got to do something about this. It's too easy at the high end.
Yeah. I mean, that's the exciting part about working in a small team and being able to just update your games when you feel it's necessary. You can be sort of fluid like that.
Hopefully it's not too brutal because the thing is I tried it, but I don't really know like what my highest score would be. You know, you have to do it through a series of a bunch of runs and I've been busy on the other projects. I leaned on, QA and some of the other people that were playing to say, it's harder, but it's not like, horrible. And I'm like, okay, well, I like the sound of that.
That's ideal. Yeah.
Well, but now I'll check in with the community and see what they think. And yeah, then, on Steam, you can just put another update out as long as, as long as it's been tested. And because we test it, that's our baseline. If it hasn't been tested, we don't want to just push it out there because we might do something
Yeah.
awful. We have quick turnaround time if there's something wrong or if there's something cool. So there's a mode we showed on a stream that we tried out just for the stream, and it was if you got hit by anything, you died instantly, no matter what. And we called it challenge mode, and people said they really wanted it, so we'll be adding challenge mode later once that can be fully tested and maybe some achievements that go with it and things like that. So that'll probably be sometime early next year. We'll have at least one mode. I think it would be neat to explore one or two others and maybe have some other ways to play. But that's actually that's leaning right into where I wanted to start maybe taking the company, which is, make some small games, see what people think of them, and then add to them if there's excitement there. I kind of wanted to do that because like you mentioned, 4 or 5 years per project. Sometimes I feel like that's a long time between, and I have lots of ideas I want to explore, and I've always wanted to try new genres. And at that rate, I don't know if I'm going to be able to explore everything I ever want to.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the response from the community, and this game has an interesting place in sort of, I guess, the Behemoth lore, but because it just kind of came out of nowhere. You said it only took 3 or so months to actually, even from inception to being available to the public, but it even had a obviously shorter announcement to release cadence. I remember looking online at one point, it's like, hey, we'll have a new game out next week. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so talk to me about the decision-making process for how quickly the game was announced and released. I mean, essentially no marketing, almost shadow dropped as close as you can get. Why'd you guys decide to do that for this game?
Well, we always want to try things and see what happens. A lot of the time we show something and within maybe the first year of development, and then for 3 years, people are suffering wanting the game. And
yeah.
It's probably a good way to do it still because people hear about the game for a while. But we wondered, what if we just sort of dropped something on Halloween? It probably would be better to hype it up a little bit longer. I think maybe maybe we did a week or so.
It was a week. It was exactly 7 days. Yeah, I did the research.
Yeah, but our fans were like, why do you keep showing us stuff so early? And so I was like, all right, let's see what happens if we don't.
So what was the fan reaction to that? Just having a new game out?
People were really excited, but I think we also messed with them because we had the roadmap announcement and Game 6 was the last thing listed. And I think people assumed that they were going to go in chronological order, which wasn't really what we were trying to communicate, but I think that's how it came across. So people were expecting Game 6, in 2028 or something, and they got it already. So I think we've flipped everything on its head. I mean, to me, that's kind of what the Behemoth is we're always trying different things, and you never know what to expect from us. And I kind of want to keep it that way because the market's constantly shifting. How people play games, who's playing games is always changing. Maybe not 3 month cycles, maybe a year or under, maybe 2 years and under is what I want to kind of aim at. But I think it's still possible. And I don't want people to be let down when they hear that, because there's smart ways to stretch content that a lot of people have been doing, mostly indies. And they've been doing it in such clever ways that, my eyes are open to, oh, you know what, you could do this and that and this. And so there's ways to stretch the content that I think are clever and cool. And I've looked at them all and been jotting them down like, oh, that's a neat idea. Is there any way I can like transform that? Because we never take an idea as it is, but we always try to like mutate it and see what else it can do.
Yeah. Well, that's what game design is taking ideas you've seen elsewhere and be like, I'll put my own spin on that. And for Behemoth, it being an arcadey, high-score-based game, were there any particular arcade games or more casual short games that you particularly like that might have inspired you to make this game?
No, and you know what? What's kind of weird is, so when we made Battle Block Theater, people were asking us like what inspired us to make Battle Block Theater, but it was our mini game from Alien Hominid. So it was like we were building off something we had done. I mean, for me, Behemoth was partially some of the DNA of Super Soviet, watching people dodge things through the sky. This time around, I did it a little different, where the prototype was like a kit of parts, where it was like, let's try it when the chicken's just falling. Let's try it where you can raise the screen. Can you steer the chicken in all 4 directions? Yes or no? And we tried these A, B scenarios, these switches. I wasn't sure what we were going to end up with. Nobody was. And it ended up being what it is now. But because I was examining these other ways to play, when we talk about having other modes, I get kind of excited. So I'm like, oh, I could try one of those ones that I thought was cool. And maybe if that one comes to fruition, we could put it in there. So I like the idea of maybe I can go get a redemption arc on one of the prototype pieces that, didn't make it all the way. So it was, because of the way it was made, I didn't even know how it was going to end up when I sat down to make it. It was a really weird process, but it was a process that I just sort of came up with and wanted to try, because I think one thing I learned as a designer that made me better was that I just don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what people want, because I'm only like one type of gamer, right? And I know there's people that like all kinds of different things. Like, you're not going to find me playing a sports game or a clicker, but there's other people who are obsessed with those. And I want to reach out to all those people and find what makes those things click to those people. So I take a step back and I go, well, these design elements are cool, but rather than go in and say this is what the game is, just take all the things that people like and see like how can I fit them together in weird ways? Because those are some of my favorite games, is when I don't know what I'm going into. I just bought Indica and I haven't played it yet, but I love the idea that people don't know how to explain what the game is. And I'm like, that's great. I can't wait to try it, because I want to play a game that I don't know how to explain. Just like, in a way, Behemoth is a little hard to explain as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've been pitching it to my friends when I'm like, hey, I'm playing the new game by the people that made Castle Crashers. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, it's kind of like Flappy Bird meets Ikaruga. It's just kind of a bullet hell arcade game kind of thing, but it's high score based, and that's been my pitch, but I don't know if that's exactly right. I mean, it is a very chaotic game, and it has the similar physics to something like Flappy Bird, but I think that the way in which you can only like save your score by passing through certain checkpoints is something you don't really see that often in arcade
hot
games.
Potato.
Yeah. Where there's a risk versus reward element to it that kind of reminds me of, I guess, Dark Souls or something, where you gotta make sure you're keeping your stuff before you like save it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure when you have a lot on you that you want to, like, it's like, I could have gone through all these checkpoints, but I got hit.
Or you're at the bottom of the screen and the arrow's like, hey, it's up there, and you just can't quite get up there.
Yeah.
Damn, and then you
got to hold out for the next one and stuff. It's a pressure cooker for sure.
My favorite small design element of the game is the fact that the chain of birds gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. It's just so satisfying to see it like flow behind you.
Yeah, I call that the chicken dragon. is what I
Yeah,
call that.
that's very fun.
It's interesting because, like, both Ikaruga and Flappy Bird are, well, maybe Flappy Bird's not 1-to-1, but they're like Ikaruga's set in a very exact pattern, whereas in ours it's random. You don't know what you're gonna run into, and they come at different angles. Whereas in Ikaruga, there's that one video of that guy playing with two hands, and he beats the game flawlessly because he's got it memorized. There's no way that you would be able to play Behemoth that way. You have to be reactive to it, so you can't memorize anything. However, that's actually something John was saying is like, can we have one that's like a preset pattern? Can we do that for like a tournament at a show? We're looking at that. I don't know. I mean, it's always possible, but it makes me wonder, would people want something that's preset so they could, speed run it or whatever, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that point, it becomes a very different appeal. A high score-based game where you're trying to react on the fly is its own thing, but pattern-based, I guess at some point, kind of level-based. I mean, that would be a level of Behemoth, which would be certainly a different appeal. Talk a little bit about the balancing and design that goes into all the crap that's on screen. I mean, there's just so much stuff. There's fruits and there's knives and there's chickens and there's candy corns, and it does, as you say, it's randomly generated in some way. But how did you balance that stuff? How did you choose to add certain level, I guess, elements? Cantaloupes, grapes, giant loaves of bread. What was the process like of actually designing and implementing all the things that you're going to interact with on screen?
It was interesting, and I think I learned some of this stuff when we were making Alien Hominid Invasion. Any element I added that did damage or would kill you or give you a game over, I was careful about that, because to me the interesting interactions are things that either almost kill you or don't even do any damage to you. People keep mentioning the cantaloupe, but the cantaloupe can't kill you. It's what the cantaloupe does that then gets you killed, right? So to me, those were the most interesting parts, was, okay, these things are going to block your way. And then I have other elements that can block your way, but they can help you. Like the eggs, you can hatch them and get the baby chickens that are worth 5 each. Now, all of a sudden, they're worth something cool. Oh, look, if you get the laser, you can break them open, a ton of them open, and get 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And then all of a sudden, you're on top of the moon with your score. And so I think that trying to get things like that where they can piggyback off each other, like the celery breaking things, you can use the celery to, like a shield or a weapon, to break the eggs and push things out of the way. Now, some people complain about the celery, which is funny to me because it's the only thing that is on your side, but it can mess with you, right? Like if you have the grapes show up and they're on the other side of the celery, they're now pushing it and using it like this wall that you can't get past. But for the most part, it's there to help you. And by making some things long and some things round and stuff like that, it's been interesting. Every time something went in, it was an interesting thing on like, how can this thing change what's going on and how does it synergize? In some way, it reminded me of working on Battle Block Theater when you had a new block type. All of a sudden, oh, what if it's coupled with this block and that one? And so that was what I was trying to go for. I still want to like come up with a couple other things, and sometimes I want to explore a method where when you play, you see something in your run, but you don't see it the next time, and vice versa. Or some things get banned from being in your run. And
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
because I think then it would be even more random. But that requires a large stable of items to do that with. And I'm not sure if I'm going to, pull that off or not. But I want to look into that because I think that was a really fun thing, was like, every time I had a new element, someone would go, what is that? After you play for like 20, 30 minutes, there's no more, what is that? And I kind of want to potentially have things that show up where you do wonder that again. I think that'd be really cool.
You talk throughout all this about having new ideas that you want to implement new modes, bringing back older things, adding certain elements, adding new kinds of high scores. And it is something that is very consistent throughout your guys' whole gameography, I guess, is never leaving any game behind and always being willing to go back and add updates and patch things or add new modes, add DLC. And I'm curious, just for you, having your fingers in so many different pies, how do you balance your work on any given game, but in particular Behemoth as this sort of smaller side project? How often were you specifically working on it while you were balancing all these other things?
So basically what I tried to do is set up other parts of the company, that the other departments ready for whatever I like. So I'll be first in the pipeline, right? A lot of the time because of design, or the art needs to be created so it can be implemented. So I'll have that stuff ready. So I preemptively have those things ready. And then I'll say, here's some stuff, guys, plug this in, and then figure out whatever you need to do on the code side after that while I do this. So we sort of like have like a game plan. Like Dan's going to be away on this portion of the project for X amount of months or days or whatever. And then they have enough to do during that time. And then I, come back and then say, where are we at? What do you guys need? And if they're still good to go, I still keep going. So most of my day when I was working on Behemoth was all dedicated to Behemoth because I preemptively got things set up for other projects. Every time we do something that's brand new, so there's a lot of problem solving. That's basically how I deal with it. I make sure that everybody knows when I'm going to be unavailable on one of the projects. So everybody's sort of handling the loads and always has something to do. There's never nothing to do. That's for sure. So,
of course. Yeah. I mean, especially with the number of projects you guys are currently working on. I was looking at that, what you previously mentioned, that roadmap video that you made and the graphic that goes with it, where you have basically all of your different games currently being worked on in some capacity, updates, expansions, recently released, something coming soon, mystery, question mark, whatever's next.
So BattleBlock's a good example of that, actually, because the new fidelity and all that stuff, I don't need to work on it. The assets are already there and they're in vector, so they can be scaled up, and the frame rate being better. That's just all on code end and all the multiplayer quality of life things and all that. So because this part of BattleBlock's update doesn't need me, it can happen without me even being around. Now the next round of BattleBlock stuff that we teased at will need me. And it's going to be awesome, but we're actually just talking about what is that really going to look like. We've been just started talking about that today. And so, then we'll roll into that as well. Wall Painter Boss is still going, of course. And so that's going to be an interesting one while game 7 gets prototyped. So yeah, we have it all rolling. And I even asked somebody yesterday, I said, how are we doing this? How are we pulling this off? Because sometimes it feels almost too easy for us to pull this off because it seems crazy. I'm like, I should be stressed. We should be freaking out. And everybody's moving quickly.
Yeah. Why aren't the walls burning down?
Like you'd think that we'd be losing our minds right now, but everybody's rolling and everything's happening the right way. And I think it's just because we worked together for so long. Like if this was all new people or fairly new people, I think we wouldn't be able to pull this off because nobody would know the ropes or each other's, strengths and all that.
And I'm sure that you've seen good response from the community in terms of that roadmap and all of the games sort of being worked on. And also, I'm coming hot off the heels of last year. I mean, 1.5 new games with Alien Hominid Invasion and Alien Hominid HD. I mean, those are 2 releases that I believe happened on the same day, if I'm remembering correctly.
And then there's 2 more coming, PS4 and PS5. Well, I'd say 2 more, but it's really 4 because HD and Invasion are both coming to PS4 and 5. So that's 4 projects all by itself.
Yeah.
But thankfully with that one as well, I'm not needed. So there are a bunch of projects that we're able to handle without me. And so I've been, for me, my focus is Behemoth, Painter Boss Paradise, and then BattleBlock Theater while Game 7 gets made alongside all of that. And so that's about my maximum workload right now, as I found. Do I want to even do more? Yeah, I do. But,
of course, yeah.
it's always burning inside of me. And I talked about things we want to do with Behemoth. Maybe some of those I won't ever get to touch on or not get to touch on right away. Revisiting Castle Crashers was great because I finally get to put some things in there that they're just going to happen for the overall game. That because as a developer, things haunt you forever, and you could do better. And I mean, Castle Crashers is a learning curve. I've had a learning curve ever since then, but Alien Hominid was even crazier because it was like here's your 20-year learning curve on display, and I'm like, oh, we're still
Your almost entire career.
yeah, just seeing like how I would have done it better.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like the idea of learning from each of your projects and each thing sort of adding to your mental database of, oh, I tried this on that one and this didn't work or that didn't work. And for Behemoth as a game that is different in scope, do you think that there's anything that you've learned while making Behemoth that you'll then be able to apply to Game 7, to these future projects?
Yeah, I think so because it'll go in two parts where I'll say here's who it's for and here's what I think it'll come out like. And then it comes out like something maybe similar, but never exactly what you thought when you sat down. And then you see people play, you hear the feedback, you hear what people wanted, and I think there's always something to take away from that. I think that one interesting thing is people are asking for a mode where there's just no danger, and it's true. Like I've been looking for games where you just fly around and you just have fun flying. And I've tried a few, but they all have a lot of challenge associated with them.
I was actually just before I ate dinner right before we recorded, I was playing the new Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I've actually never played a game like that before. And so what I was doing was, how do you balance the pitch? How do you do all this stuff? And you, left bumper plus clicking in the right stick does something different, and you're managing all these numbers, and it's a lot. But what I want to get to is kind of what you're talking about. Is I just want to fly the plane.
Just want to fly, yeah.
But there's a big learning curve with something like that. But I do think that there's an appeal to just existing in a space, and that's something I've always been, or digital space specifically. That's something I've always been a proponent of. Is video games having this space to not necessarily have challenge, not necessarily have danger, because there's just a fun and something that can tickle the mind of someone who just wants to exist in a digital space and have the emotions of controlling something on screen. Even something that simple can be really compelling.
Totally. But sometimes it's hard to design something like that because we're so used to battling death in games. So, there's a part of me that's like disappointed that I couldn't find that exact thing that I'm talking about right now, because like, what if there were no dangers in Behemoth? Like, we're going to explore that. Maybe we can find something that still either has an ending or some kind of engaging thing that you're trying to do while not having to worry about, turning into a roast chicken. It is always fun to explore that. And I think that like we've gotten into like an era of games where people are more interested in like farming crops and stuff like that, that they don't, you don't have to worry about dying in Farming Simulator. And lots of people like that. You don't have to worry about dying in Euro Truck.
Yeah. Both those games would be very different.
Yeah, imagine.
Maybe there's a market for that, though. That's the fun thing about the modern games industry.
Hey, if there was something that would kill me in Euro Truck, I would play that all the time.
I'm just imagining a farming simulator. It's like a battle farming simulator where you raise your crops and that somehow attacks your opponent. I have no idea. I
really liked SnowRunners because the thing you're battling is like gravity and like the mud and stuff, and I thought that was fun. Like I actually really liked that. I play almost everything. I've played like pretty much every genre there is, and sometimes I like exploring genres I don't like Battle Block Theater. I don't really like platformers that much because usually what they do is you get through jump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you need to get to jump 10, and that's the hardest one, and you fall, and now you're back at either 1 or 2 or 3. And you have to redo this, and then you fall again, and you're like, I just want to practice that one. And Battle Block Theater, you basically die if you miss the jump, so then you reappear where you last tried. Now, on paper, it sounds stupid. Like, it really does. Like, if you where's the challenge in that, right? Because you're just starting right where you failed from, and you just do it till you got it. Okay. But you'll never hear somebody say Battle Block Theater is not challenging at all, right? So it's interesting because on paper it does not sound like it works. You have unlimited lives. You can start wherever you want. Again, how's that going to work? But it does somehow.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that you're not really a fan of platformers, because I was playing a little bit of Behemoth right before we started recording, and I was flying through a sea of different food items, which I want to touch on in a second, and getting chased by knives and forks and all this stuff. And the thing that popped in my mind that reminded me of is those really, really ridiculous Super Mario Maker levels where all the fire bars are like rotating around and the blades and stuff. And obviously, those are all, it's a different kind of experience, but it's such a busy thing that my mind kind of connected it to those crazy difficult Mario Maker levels.
Yeah, it kind of is. I guess when I say platformer, I'm imagining that my feet touch the ground and I jump and then I have to touch the ground again.
There's no top or bottom to Behemoth. Am I right about that?
There is, but it's so far. It is so far. You would and you usually die before you can even see them. Like if you just let yourself fall, I forgot how long it takes to actually find the bottom, but it's there.
Okay.
And the top's there too. For anyone who wants to explore the boundaries of space.
There's 2 new achievements for you to add.
Yeah. Oh my god, I wouldn't even want to ask that of somebody because I remember falling for like a couple minutes and still not seeing it yet. Originally, it was actually very tight. You didn't want to scrape along the ground and all that, right? Or fall into it's like a little forest with a red light or something in it. You don't want to go in there. Originally, we had that, but the problem was there were things that you needed to dodge by going below them, and if that happened enough times randomly, then it would feel unfair. So I just pushed it way down, and I noticed that a lot of people have different strategies. Some people like to dive a lot to get away from things, or when you want to collect the baby chickens you dropped, you might want to fall and catch them all, because you can do that for a while until they go too fast. But I didn't like removing that strategy. I wanted to keep it there, and I didn't really feel like the ground or the sky were really contributing much to what we were trying to do. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, you are dodging stuff, so I guess it was hard for me to say what genre this is. If you actually look up genres, runner is actually one of the best descriptive, but you're not even running, so it just sounds like if you I like to take a step back and think of like laymen, right? Because they're going to hear runner and they're going to think that you're running on the ground, but you're not. You never touch the ground.
The last thing I kind of wanted to touch on is the Behemoth as a celebration game. On your website and on Steam, it mentions that this is a celebration of making indie games for the past 21 years. And I'm curious to you, what is it about Behemoth that you consider to be a celebration of that 20 plus years of game development?
There's a couple things. One, that we were able to put something together just to finally give the chicken a game, because people always say they wanted a game with the chicken. And when I've thought about a game with the chicken, I usually don't think of like an epic adventure that goes on a long time. So it had to be a smaller thing. You know, John was really big on that. He's like, we're going to hit 21, and like we missed 20. Now we're at 21. No one cares when you're at 22. You know, he said we have to have something. And I'm like, you're right. Yeah, we really should. But it's really just, you know, giving people something to just kick back with while they wait for all our stuff. Because we always make people wait. And it was kind of like, here, have this while you wait. Like kind of like an appetizer.
It's a video game hors d'oeuvre.
Like that's the weirdest thing to me, is like there's so many reasons why we made the game, and there's so many things that the game represents. I guess there's not that really strong of an answer for anything in particular for it. It's sort of just, we make stuff and we wanted to make this, and here it is. It's you know, there's people who think it's an ARG. There's people who think we're hiding something in there that they're supposed to notice. And, you know, I guess we've done that to a certain degree, where, you know, the ending of Battle Block is now the beginning of Pit People. And, you know, people believe very deeply that we planned this, and we planned all of our games really far. They think that we planned all of our games in 2003. And I'd love to give them, you know, the satisfaction of saying, yeah, that's true. I don't think that far ahead. I really don't. I don't do that.
No, of course.
I'm not going to pretend like I know I plotted out my whole life. You know, when we made the Behemoth, there was less than a fraction of a percent of survival rate, because there was no downloadable anything. You had to, you know, convince GameStop managers to carry more than one copy at a time. For anyone that knows GameStop's model, they only carry used copies, and you basically fleece like the whole thing. They take 100%, and you don't see any. So they don't want to carry a couple copies at a time, and then you get the truck drivers and printing things. And we came from that time where we were just trying to make it, and we're really lucky. And I'm just so thankful that I can even say we made it this far. That anybody who's ever talked about our games, played them, anything, I want to say thank you to those people, because I just can't believe we made it this far, and I'm so happy we can keep making things and people are still there with us. I can't even get a plumber without being asked for Castle Crashers 2, which is, awesome. Yeah. I guess, like, in the end of the day, it's actually really awesome. I think there's some people that drive them crazy, but I know that means people care and they want more, and we're never afraid to revisit stuff. And I hope that Invasion has showed that we're not afraid to revisit things. But one thing I do want to say is, hopefully for the people who ask for Castle Crashers 2, they're not asking for more of the same, because the last thing Behemoth has ever done, ever, is more of the same of anything. We always want to put a spin on anything we do, and that includes our own stuff. It feels surreal to start talking about Game 7 and Game 8 and stuff. It's like, wow, really? We're making that far in? So it's been a real trip, and to see how technology's advanced. Now we can do things like back when we made Castle Crashers, we're like, oh, we can get so many guys on the screen. But now, you can see even more guys on the screen, and technology is starting to not really be a bottleneck. Like, texture memory is not so much of a thing.
Next up is Castle Crashers Muso, where you just clouds
exactly.
of guys.
Dynasty Warriors version would be amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've in my mind, I've thought of it in all these different ways. I've thought of a Souls-like. I've thought of the Dynasty Warriors angle. I've thought of all these, different ways to play it, board game, everything, right? I've thought about it all because people ask all the time. And, we always look at that, but it has to come together naturally. Hopefully that happens for people asking for that. And then there's other people who say, don't listen to them. We want more new stuff all the time. I want to see a new universe. And sometimes I'll hear comments from people who, they played all of our stuff and they're like, wow, Behemoth is actually a fun game. And it's like, did you not expect it to? Like, how many games do we need to make to show that we know, like, at least we kind of know what we're doing? But it's true. Every time we make something new, it's uncharted territory, and there are things we don't know what we're doing. And when we tackle things, we always think of, instead of doing it how it's always been, we try to rethink, how it would be done. Everything we do is like hit and miss, and for some people, and but the nostalgia thing, working on Castle again, so like spooky, because people have a very strong opinion on like how things should look, how things should it be, what we should be spending our time on. And, Battle Block's going to have more stuff too. And people are going to have strong opinions again, and, keep them coming, because we listen and we learn every time. But, because we're trying something new every time, and everybody wants something different, there's always going to be somebody that's disappointed and somebody that's super stoked. And I wish that I could find the game that everyone wants to play in the world, but I kind of came to terms that I've just got to make more games, and then hopefully you can pick and choose the ones you want.
That's what I love about doing these interviews with developers is listening to the thought process that goes into all of this. You're people making things, and you're struggling through these, and you don't know exactly what's going on. It's not struck down from on high that you're gonna make a pit people or whatever. And it's nice to know that we're all working through this together. And your games have been around, some of them, for almost my entire life, and certain of the games are ones that I grew up on. I actually have here, I just remembered when I realized I was going to talk to you, that I have a piece of Castle Crashers Shovel Knight crossover.
The crossover.
Drawing. I did this in 2015, so almost 10 years ago. I've had this in my binder.
Wait, Shovel Knight, it's been that long?
2014.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
2014 for Shovel Knight. Dan, thank you very much for joining me. I had a great time talking to you about Behemoth, about the Behemoth, about video games, about your career, and I hope you guys all, if you're watching this, go give Behemoth a try. Of course, all your other games also available on Steam, but I will link the link to buy Behemoth on Steam in the description, and of course, subscribe here to watch more interviews. I do one almost every single week, and I'll see you guys in the future for more Dev Dives.
Thanks for having me.